Next, we're going to bring on Jay Solomon and Aaron McLean. Jay Solomon is a Free Press contributor and former chief foreign affairs correspondent at the Wall Street Journal and author of The Iran Wars. Aaron McLean is a national security and defense fellow at the Hudson Institute and the host of the podcast School of War. Thank you so much both for being here.
Hi, Rafaela. Thanks.
Jay, let's start with you. You've covered diplomacy with Iran for years. Obviously, we know over the past few weeks there have been major attempts to strike a deal. Some critics say that the asks were too extreme and therefore a deal was never going to be accomplished. I'm curious what you know through your reporting about where the deal had stood right before the strikes this morning.
I mean, it was basically stuck. I mean, I've covered this for literally more than a decade. The Iranian positions never really change. It's kind of, we have the right to enrich uranium. We have the right to have a nuclear capability. We're willing to limit kind of how much we're going to produce as far as enriched uranium. We have a fatwa against producing nuclear weapons, which you can believe or not. So basically, Trump was looking at diplomacy that was not going to shift the line on the nuclear program. At least, you know, he was looking at essentially a deal that Obama struck in 2015 or no deal at all. So I think the Iranians were hoping to game it out, extend the process, get its allies, whether it's the Qataris or other countries in the Middle East, to pressure the administration not to engage in war and kind of string this thing out. Meanwhile, continue to consolidate power internally after this uprising in January, which, you know, we still don't know how many people were killed. So I don't think the diplomacy was really going to go anywhere. I think it was going to be the Iranians were testing if they could drag this thing out, consolidate power internally, hope to stabilize their economy somewhat, and kind of keep going. But I don't think anyone serious really thought there was going to be some huge diplomatic breakthrough that was going to change the calculation much, particularly on the nuclear program or the missile program.
Critics of the administration in the past few weeks would have said that the asks within the framework of, you know, the diplomatic papers that they were putting forward were too extreme, that Iran was never going to agree to it, and therefore they were setting themselves up for a military situation that we're in right now. Aaron, do you think, what do you make of that critique, that the asks were too extreme and that this was going to happen?
Hi, Rafaela. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to whether or not you consider the demand essentially for zero enrichment and the meaningful closure of any path to nuclear weapons for Iran as extreme. I mean, there's certainly demands that the Iranians were unlikely to accept. That's not exactly the same sort of thing as extreme. You know, this administration clearly decided that it was in the national interest of the United States that the Iranian nuclear program effectively cease. That's very different from the position taken years ago, for example, by the Obama administration. But President Trump was consistent about that beginning around spring of last year. There was sort of some movement in the lead up to it, but that was the premise on which Operation Midnight Hammer was launched last June. And it seems to be one of the fundamental premises of this war. So look, I mean, if your goal is to get a diplomatic outcome at any cost, and if that cost is going to include you haven't really ended the Iranian nuclear program, then sure, I suppose you can consider that extreme, but that's clearly not the perspective of this administration.
For people that have been, you know, having sort of one ear to the news, but are sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you know, Trump has been threatening to strike since January, since the mass protests across the country. Why at this very particular moment, late last night, early this morning?
Well, we can certainly speculate, and more information will come out in the days to come. Here's some speculation for you. Obviously, it took some time to mass our forces in the region, but you notice that this round of strikes began with some decapitation efforts. The information I have is that the Israelis spearheaded those in Tehran, perhaps in other places as well. If I were a military planner working on this problem, I might have as the condition I wanted set before pulling the trigger, knowledge that key personnel who I wanted to take out were actually targetable, were actually in a place where I could get them. I've seen reports that there were meetings of Iranian officials gathering this morning in Tehran. Another extraordinary thing, Rafael, I tell you, is despite the weeks of rising tensions and kind of a general expectation amongst many parties that something like this was going to occur, it appears that the Israelis and the Americans achieved surprise this morning, which is quite striking. Through, by the way, what appears to be the very simple trick of not launching the attack at night. They launched the attack in daylight, which was enough to sort of throw the Iranians off, it seems, given the past precedent of strikes at night. So that's one possibility. We'll know more in the days to come.